Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 139. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday. Steelers Nation, Dave, getting ready for Day 2 of OTA's team showing up at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex on Tuesday for their first voluntary practice, the first of 6 that run through next week. And so, a lot to talk about. Football is, in a way, back.
Football in short season underway. Happy Wednesday to you, Alex. We have no shortage of things to talk about for today's show, that's for sure. And really, to be honest with you, I don't know what way we should lead this show off with Terry Bradshaw breaking out the fire torch, if you will, and scorching earth, or the things that happened and did not happen, and who was and wasn't at OTAs that kicked off on Tuesday there. So dealer's choice here, whatever way you want to, our very long pre-production meeting that we had prior to the podcast, we didn't decide which way we were going to start here. So dealer's choice to you, which way you want to go here.
After hours of consideration and contemplation where to start, let's start with the housekeeping and the signing that Pittsburgh made yesterday with, and here's a $10 name for you, Dave, Montana Lemonious-Craig, undrafted free agent. He was with the team in rookie minicamp. He spent time at Colorado and Arizona, so a wide receiver joining the Steelers for the first day of OTAs, and he's wearing number 14, so Pittsburgh wasting no time handing out George Pickens' old digits.
You know how the old saying goes: when life takes away your Pickens, you make Lemonious.
I'll give that a 4 out of 10.
Oh, what a name! I gotta admit that was a new name on my radar, and I think you said, "Oh, surely we had a draft profile on him, right? Out of Arizona," but we did not. So I don't know much about him other than some measurables throughout the pre-draft process. I think there's a few clips on Twitter from 2023 with him. What do you know about Lemonious-Craig?
Well, like I said, the reason why that name sounded familiar when the signing was first announced was because he was invited and participated in the team's 3-day rookie minicamp 2 weeks after the draft. And so they didn't sign him immediately post rookie minicamp tryout, but they did end up bringing him in after the Pickens trade and after having that spot available. So they decided to add some depth there, and potentially we'll talk about DK Metcalf not being at OTAs yesterday. Maybe Pittsburgh felt they wanted to add an extra receiver into that mix as well. I can try to pull up what I've written about him in my tryout kind of bio that I do each year during rookie minicamp. He was, like I said, undrafted. He was at Colorado and Arizona last year, caught just 17 passes for 172 yards and 1 touchdown. He really never had outstanding production in his college career, was a little more productive at Colorado. At his pro day, he weighed in at 6'01", 189, ran a 4.54 40-yard dash.
All right. So the Steelers are now at 91 on their roster, I believe, under contract right now.
Yes, the roster is officially full, and so they get 91. I always give the caveat that Pittsburgh's allowed to go over the maximum of 90 because of Julius Welshoff, the international exemption, and so they can carry 91 like they did last year. So we'll see whether roster moves get made, but right now they are at capacity.
And I'm doubting Lemonious-Craig got a signing bonus here. It's probably just going to be a rookie minimum salary, unguaranteed, and we'll see how long he can last on the roster.
And just quickly to note, you have the contract details on Trey Sermon, correct?
Yes, and that ended up, I believe, being a veteran benefit contract with no signing bonus. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick here. I wrote it a few days ago. Base salary for him is the minimum of $2.17 million. He did not receive a signing bonus. This is a veteran benefit deal, so his cap number for 2024, at least as it sits right now, $1.03 million. That was not enough to make a difference in the rule of 51, so it did not move the salary cap needle as far as that is concerned there. So one other note, I don't know if we hit on this the other day or not, but it come to find out Max Hurlman and who was the other?
Gareth Warren.
Yeah, Gareth Warren each received $2,000 signing bonuses after they were signed after the rookie mini camp. That info didn't come out until a little bit later, so I updated the post on that with the undrafted free agents and all the signing bonuses there. So each one of them have it's guaranteed money of $2,000 for each one of those guys, and those are 3-year contracts, and at $666 dollars against basically against the cap as far as proration for 2025 for each of those two guys. So that clears up a little bit of housekeeping as far as those contracts go. The NFLPA has finally caught up with the signings of all those undrafted free agents as well as all the draft picks, and that includes Derek Harmon as well. And my numbers matched what they have to say on that. And the Steelers are currently, with their rule of 51, $32,409,294 under the cap with a rule of 51 as we sit here on this Wednesday morning.
So you will sleep well tonight, Dave, having everything aligned perfectly. All right, Dave, let's talk about Steelers OTAs kicking off on Tuesday. Before we talk about the players who were there and participated, let's talk about the players who did not attend the first day. Now, it is important to note, as we always do, these are voluntary sessions. There is no requirement for anyone to show up. They cannot be punished for it. That won't happen until mandatory minicamp where attendance is required. But the 4 players that appear to have not shown up for yesterday's practice was T.J. Watt, Darius Slay, DK Metcalf, and Isaac Seumalo. And so, of course, Aaron Rodgers not there. Separate discussion to be had about that. But the players who are current Steelers, currently under contract, Watt, Metcalf, Seumalo, and Slay.
And technically, they were not supposed to report that, right? Have we got in trouble in the past? You guys stopped counting heads. Who's there and who isn't there? Supposedly, the media is not supposed to, unless another player says to them that is there that someone isn't there. They're not supposed to report that kind of stuff. But all that stuff always generally comes out anyway there. But the 4 names that you mentioned there wasn't super surprised that T.J. Watt was not there. I guess not totally shocked. Maybe a guy like Isaac Seumalo not there, but I was a little bit surprised that Darius Slay and DK Metcalf were not there. Now, we could turn around today and both those guys show up and they ended up having doctor's appointment or dentist appointments or other prior commitments on the calendar or what have you. We don't know. Once again, it's important to remind everybody that these are voluntary in nature. Obviously, you would like 100% participation in this. How many times over the years have they not had 100% participation? Quite a bit, especially when it comes to each individual OTA session. So I guess, long story short, I was a bit surprised that, and once again, that, are they really excused when you don't have to be there? You can't really label it that, but I was a bit surprised that Metcalf and Darius Slay weren't present, and we'll see if they show up either Wednesday or Thursday.
Sure, and I would have liked those guys to be there. Metcalf gave the guy the giant contract too. I'd like him to be there working. It is voluntary, so I'm not going to completely criticize the guy. And while I've been pretty critical of Aaron Rodgers not making a decision, not attending OTAs, and had that column yesterday, at least with Metcalf, he was there for a lot of the other offseason phase 1, phase 2 part of the programs, which is not the full practices, but you're there in the weight room. You're doing some, to a degree, on-field work, and so he has shown up for several sessions. He's worked with Mason Rudolph. Rudolph talked about that. We'll discuss that later in the show, I'm sure. So Metcalf has been participating. We'll see if he does anything, if he does appear for today's practice or tomorrow's session. So we'll keep an eye on it for sure. And then Watt, I don't think will be there. Will he show up at all at OTAs? It's reasonable to think he will just stay away this entire window.
And what about Seumalo?
Yeah, I think he'll probably show up at some point, but that is kind of one of the classic veteran old heads, been here in the system for a couple of years now. A little less urgent to get him reps than somebody else. And even if he was in attendance, Pittsburgh probably monitoring his reps. They really do a pretty careful job of not giving him too much work in training camp and situations and climates like this.
Do we know for sure whether or not Chris Boswell was there?
I have no confirmation he was, but I've not heard anything about him not attending, and I'm sure you'll be up at night until you get an answer on this one.
I did not say. Look, it's in the grand scheme of things. Look, we spent a lot of time talking about. Oh boy, we sure would like Aaron Rodgers is there if indeed he was going to sign and all, right? But and how important that is. How as a whole, how important is it for a guy like DK Metcalf not being there? And look, I mean, for Chris Boswell, whether he's there or not, it's it's really not
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's not like they're going to do much with him anyway. I just think it would be interesting because of the whole contract thing that I talked about when it comes to him and all, and really the same with with TJ Watt there. But and yeah, DK Metcalf has been part of phase 1 and phase 2 and all like that, and at least he knows his teammates' names and they know him, and there's been some level of work with the quarterbacks evidently in some way, shape, or form, whether probably away from the facility, I don't know, but long story short, how important is it for DK Metcalf to be there at some point during these 6 OTA practices?
Oh, I think it's important for him to show up at some point. To skip all of OTAs, I think would be pretty notable for a guy who just inked the biggest contract for a wide receiver in Steelers history. Any time missed to work together with the full team and these 11-on-11 sessions is valuable. It's time lost. Now, do you put your tinfoil hat on and say, is DK Metcalf in California catching passes from Aaron Rodgers? I don't know. We'll have to maybe try to get more information on that. And I'll tell you this, had Aaron Rodgers made his decision, signed with the Steelers, and attended OTAs yesterday, I bet you DK Metcalf is there. And so that is another reason why a guy like Rodgers, I think, should have been at OTAs yesterday, because whenever that guy's there, whenever your quarterback is there, everybody shows up.
All right. So we've got at least a short list of the people that we think worked there at this point. We'll see what happens on Wednesday and Thursday as they close out the first week of OTA practices.
Day for me, the first day of OTAs is a lot of box checking. Obviously, the evaluation portion is difficult because A, we're not there, and B, they're not in pads. But I like to get a lay of the land, who is coming off injury, who's working, who's healthy. We have some box checking on that. Roman Wilson, Cole Holcomb, those guys practicing seemingly in full yesterday. That's good. Not a shock as they were practicing late last season. They had their windows to return open. They were never officially activated off of their injured lists, but they were practicing late in the season. But still good to see those guys hit the ground running literally to start 2025. And then the big one for me, Dave, was second-year offensive tackle Troy Fautanu off the dislocated kneecap that limited him to just one game his rookie season. Would he practice? Would he be full go? You imagined he would, but we got confirmation he was working right tackle. Broderick Jones officially at left tackle. So big box to check for Troy Fautanu.
Yeah, agreed. And I guess if we go down the full list of people that are players that were there and dealt with injury last year and seemingly back healthy and all, I mean the list is pretty long. Roman Wilson, it was good to see him back out there. Cole Holcomb looked like he was as full a go as everybody else out there. Troy Fautanu, you mentioned him. Oh, who else? I guess the Marvin Leal. I think I saw pictures of him, and he obviously missed time last year. Logan Lee. I don't think a guy that him and Leal we didn't really talk a lot about. I think in the show leading up to this was another one that obviously missed time last year. Is there anybody else on this list that was kind of dinged up late last season or missed time that was seemingly back out there for the start of OTAs? I think that's the list, isn't it?
I think so, and good call. I keep forgetting about Leal because of
Yeah.
that neck injury last year, and that's an important one for him. Lee did come back and practice late last year, like Wilson, like Holcomb, and so that's a little less notable. I think Lee even talked about that his injury was never that bad. What was it, a calf or a hamstring? They put him on IR
Right.
to start the season and basically stashed him. They were never bothered to burn up one of those IR to return spots. So that one is a little more procedural, but still good to note, and it's still just good for a guy like Logan Lee or a guy like Liao or even Holcomb. Let's start with a clean slate to the season. We're healthy. We're working day one. That's important. So I think with the guy in Holcomb's situation, with that scary knee injury back in 2023, he did return late last year, but that was just, I think, to get some reps in, to kind of be able to check that box, ring that bell. You're back on the practice field now for 2025 with an eye towards truly playing, making the team, contributing again. You have that clean slate. You're working in OTAs. You're starting at the starting line like everybody else, and that's really important, I think, for a guy like Holcomb, physically, but also mentally. That I'm good. I'm back to normal. We're good to go. Let's keep pushing.
All right. So we got a few questions answered there when it comes to some people that were dinged up. Could Isaac Seumalo had some sort of procedure or something even that we don't know about that maybe has him kind of slowed?
Well, if it did, I think he'd probably be with the team to be checked out medically if there was an issue. So I'm going to assume just veteran birth certificate related absence than actual injury.
All right. So the main takeaway is this team looks healthy starting OTAs.
Yep, knock on wood, it stays that way. Broderick Jones, I believe I read, will speak to the media today, and so I'll be interested in his comments about moving back to left tackle. But like I mentioned, seeing those clips of your two starting tackles this year, Jones and Fautanu, and frankly, this will be the first season since maybe 2022 that Pittsburgh knows exactly who's playing left tackle, who's still playing at right tackle this season, because in past years there was some debate about where's Broderick Jones going to go? Could Dan Moore move? Fautanu, where is he going to fit? This year, you feel like these guys have a lot to prove, obviously, but we know exactly where they're going to play.
Yeah, and there was the whole Dan Moore, can he or can he play on the right side? He said wasn't comfortable over there, and then obviously a Fautanu injury, and what would have happened if Fautanu would have stayed healthy last year? How Broderick Jones probably doesn't get that much playing time, right? Or does he?
We'll never know. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, Fautanu and Jones rotated briefly in that Broncos game, and then Jones had that horrible showing with all the penalties. Fautanu finished it out, and we were about to get to decision time. Would it be for that Week 3 game against, I believe, the Chargers? Will it be Fautanu? Will the rotation still exist? Will they scrap it? And then Fautanu got hurt. So it's one of those mysteries that we'll never get an answer to.
At least, like you said, that it's been a while since at this point of the offseason we can, for lack of a better word, write down and pin what left to right offensive line will be, barring, once again, barring everybody staying healthy.
Definitely. Now they have to prove it and prove that they're a capable group, but you basically have that starting five in stone. The depth behind is a question. So there's still many questions with this offensive line, but at least you know essentially who's playing where, and that's a good starting point.
Sure.
All right, Dave, what else? Let's stay with the Steelers offense. Mason Rudolph, of course, speaking. He was QB1 yesterday as Rodgers is absent and saying all the right things, doing all the right things. Players seem to like him, respect him. Rudolph said he meshes with the Arthur Smith offense well. Those two guys getting along well. It's the spring. You're going to hear that across the board, obviously, but no reason to be skeptical about Rudolph's comments about his like and fit in the Steelers offense. It's why I'm sure he signed back with Pittsburgh.
Isn't it great that one of the big stories yesterday was Mason Rudolph's mustache?
It's a Tom Selleck-esque. It's pretty impressive mustache, Dave.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of a mix between, Wyatt Earp, Freddie Mercury. I don't know. But I guess the main thing is that things that he said weren't newsworthy in a especially in a negative manner, and that really the biggest talk about Mason Rudolph was, man, look at that mustache. So he did say all the right things. We fully expected that he would. He says it's nothing new to him as far as all the I guess outside noise. Everybody continues to talk about will they or won't they with the Aaron Rodgers situation. And he says, look, the only thing I can do is go about my business and lead the way I know how to lead, and take advantage of my reps and play as good as I possibly can, and try to get work in with the receivers, and just everything that you would really want out of a quarterback in his position, based on everything that we know about this team at this point of the offseason.
Yeah, and even though Pittsburgh is still pursuing Aaron Rodgers, and he may and probably will eventually become the Steelers quarterback and make Rudolph the number two, Rudolph is well liked in that locker room. And you do wonder, I made this point on Monday's show, the longer that Rodgers is absent, the more that Rudolph works and acts like quarterback one, because as of right now, he is quarterback one. Will the locker room gravitate towards him and believe he should stay as quarterback one? Pittsburgh saw a quarterback get swapped out and kind of get the short end of the straw last year, and Justin Fields getting replaced for Russell Wilson midseason. Will they see that again this year? And not the same format, obviously. You would assume Rodgers will sign before any games start to occur and kick off, but a well-liked, hardworking quarterback who's there, who's doing everything, that gets bumped out by somebody else that comes into the fold. Last year, Wilson, not his fault, but just him being healthy, and then this year with Rodgers whenever he decides. So just would love to be a fly on the wall for some of those internal thoughts and conversations about how this team handles Rudolph versus Rodgers, and a team that seems to like Mason Rudolph, that seems to trust Mason Rudolph and is putting in the work with Mason Rudolph, that may see him get bumped out at some point later this offseason.
And look, obviously several of these younger guys on the roster that weren't around, or that were either first year with the team last year. A lot of them don't know him probably on the offensive side of football, but those that do know him, the Pat Fryermuth, who else knows him on the offensive side of football?
I mean, most of the offense knows him, right? I mean, I know some guys don't. DK, they're just going to know each other, but Calvin Austin, the offensive
Fryermuth.
line. Yeah, Darnell Washington, the offensive line of Jones, Seumalo, not Frazier, not Fautanu, but some of those guys do. Jalen Warren. I mean, a lot of the core pieces know Rudolph. He was only gone for a season.
Right. In other words, he's not, not a polarizing guy either. So I imagine he is liked in that locker room.
Yeah. So whatever that's worth, Rudolph will take those quarterback one reps until that changes, essentially. Anything else from the offensive players that spoke yesterday, Dave? Some were downplaying the importance of OTAs. It was a mixed bag of reaction. Some, largely with Rodgers' absence, obviously his name came up a lot in conversation. Many tried to downplay it offensively, defensively, that it doesn't matter that much. But I think they're just trying to say the right thing to not draw a lot of attention, because if you sit there and say that it does matter a lot, then that's going to be a big headline in itself. But even Pat Fryermuth couldn't help but acknowledge that it is an important time of season to work and come together and set a foundation for the year, so that by training camp you're good to go and you're truly getting ready for the season.
Hold up here. How many of these guys on that offensive side of football do actually know Mason Rudolph from his prior time in Pittsburgh? I know Robert Woods doesn't. Cordell Patterson doesn't. Seumalo does, right? Seumalo does. DK Metcalf doesn't. Max Sharping probably doesn't. Scotty Miller probably doesn't. Calvin Anderson probably doesn't. Gainwell, Parnham. What about Ward? Was Jonathan Ward around 2 years ago?
Nope.
Pat Fryermuth does. Skylar Thompson obviously doesn't. Skoranek doesn't. McCollum does. He was on the practice squad. Jalen Warren, Connor Hayward knows him. Broker doesn't. Evan Hall doesn't. Lance McCutcheon doesn't. Brandon Johnson, was he around 2 years ago?
No, he was signed last year.
Broderick Jones does. Spencer Anderson knows him. Calvin Austin does. McCormick doesn't. Frazier doesn't. Dylan Cook probably does. Darnell does. And, it's not a long list.
Well, some of those names are reserve future contracts, the natural roster turnover, but even point taken, but these guys are getting to know him now. And,
Right.
and they're working together, not just in OTAs yesterday, but during phase 1, phase 2 of the offseason programs. I assume Rudolph has been at essentially all those activities.
Sure.
And so that relationship has formed and is continuing to form.
Got some breaking news here. It looks like Kenneth Gainwell has switched his number to 14 since it opened up.
Oh, okay. So we wondered about that because that's what he wore with Philadelphia. What number was he wearing initially in Pittsburgh? I forget
I
what
think
the initial.
21, wasn't he?
I don't remember what it was, but I know he wore 14 with his time with the Eagles, and so with that opening up, so that means Lemonious-Craig is no longer wearing 14. You can't have two offensive players even
He's
in the
wearing
offseason.
21.
Lemonious-Craig.
Right. They have.
Okay, so they switched.
Yeah, so they switched there.
And I
All right.
assume there weren't too many Kenneth Gainwell jerseys flying off the shelves, so he doesn't have to buy out his stock of those 21 jerseys.
Hey, look, we're just trying to keep everybody caught up with the breaking news here. All right, where do we live? Yeah, look, Rudolph, not a lot to talk about when it comes to him and what he said.
And just to tie a bow on that conversation, some people ask, why didn't DK Metcalf switch back to 14 once Pickens was traded? The way the NFL policy works is if you switch your jersey number, without joining a new team, then you have to buy out the stock of jerseys of your previous number. So Metcalf would have to buy out every number 4 Metcalf jersey that was still in stock. And I assume he did not want to do that. And so that's why he's keeping number 4, and now Gainwell has that 14.
Yeah, I would imagine once you sign that contract with the licensing and the NFL, PA or NFL, what's the other organization that handles the
I'm not sure.
merchandising and whatnot? But that's probably obviously being a high profile player, they started selling the jerseys and all, so that's where that probably comes in.
All right, let's go back to OTAs. Talked about Rudolph, talked about the offensive line, Freiermuth. Calvin Austin speaking. He says he's ready to work, not thinking contract extension. We had that discussion last week about Austin. Was he a potential sleeper extension candidate? Maybe still could be, but right now he's focused on working, getting better.
Yeah, and as I've said, since he essentially was drafted by the Steelers, I enjoy Calvin Austin interviews. I enjoy hearing him talk. He's another player I think said all the right things, and even though you can make a argument, and I'd listen to it about Calvin Austin potentially being an contract extension candidate this offseason, I would be a bit surprised if that ultimately happens for all the reasons that I don't want to rehash all the things that we said the other couple of shows ago about it and all, but I don't think it's totally out of the question, but it's also that I don't something I don't think he's losing a lot of sleep over at this point, because in the grand scheme of things, I would be a bit surprised if he ultimately does sign one.
Yeah, I think the best thing for Austin is put your head down, work, don't think about extension. If the team approaches you with something, if something can happen to come together that makes sense, maybe you explore that, but let your agent take care of all that kind of stuff. Focus, work. And yesterday, Dave, he was the number 1 receiver in camp because Metcalf wasn't there. Of course, Pickens is traded, so he was the guy yesterday. More opportunities, more reps, and it's a big year for Calvin Austin.
And I think in a post that you wrote a couple of days ago, you essentially have Calvin Austin becoming the next Antonio Brown as far as performance and ability and all, right?
Yeah, on the field, Antonio Brown. No, I mean, I forget what even I referenced there. Obviously, Dave saying that in jest, but, we'll see what he can do. I mean, Austin, when I went back through the tape, and that's the point I think you're making, was I'd forgotten some of the plays that Austin had made last year, the route running, the separation, the big play ability downfield, 3.6, what was it? He had a 20-plus yard reception every 3.6 catches, which was a really, really strong rate and harkens back to his Memphis days of how efficient he was in producing those big plays. So obviously he has to do it again. I've talked about him being more of an ideal number 3 than a number 2, but yeah, he impressed. I thought his game grew last year. His catch radius expanded, and that was important to see. So we'll see if that growth can continue in 2025.
Oh, okay. So you're not predicting 110 catches for 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns then, right?
No, but I will take it for sure.
Okay. All right. Look,
Roman
we
Wilson.
we both came away impressed with the development that he had last year.
Yes, for sure. Roman Wilson speaking to the media as well. He's healthy, as we mentioned, top of the show, good to go, and really putting 2024 behind him. Was asked a couple questions about last year, and his response largely was, "I'm just focused on this season." And these reports are always a little dubious, and I can never tell about player shape. You do a better job of that than I do, Dave. But Brooke Pryor is saying that Wilson looked a little more bulked up in 2025, his sophomore season.
He looked the same to me in the couple of clips that floated around. It was good to see him seemingly running, and healthy and all like that. I think she did kind of caveat that in her interview or whatnot, saying, "Well, obviously you don't have guys out there to compare him to, such as DK Metcalf and George Pickens, and maybe that did make him larger by association there, but." I didn't he in so many words say no, he did not gain any weight. He's the same weight. Maybe he has kind of changed his overall build a little bit by conditioning and the NFL workout program and all like that. But I didn't notice anything from what I remember from pictures from last year.
Yeah, it does help when Pickens is gone and Metcalf's not there, and it's Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson being your top two receivers. You typically don't get overshadowed the way you will be whenever Metcalf shows up. All right, Dave. Any other Steelers offensive players that spoke yesterday that caught your attention?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Defensively, I don't think we heard from as many players defensively yesterday. Deshaun Elliott did speak and talked about having a good working relationship with new DBs coach Jared Alexander, who's not new to Pittsburgh, was assistant a couple of years ago, but missed Elliott last year when Alexander was out there with the Raiders and then returned to Pittsburgh, replacing Grady Brown. Elliott's philosophy this year, Dave, make plays. A good goal to have.
Yeah, I concur with that. And looks, second year, obviously, with the Steelers, had really was an impactful player and really wound up being a good signing for this team last offseason. And another year in the system here, playing alongside, obviously, with Minka Fitzpatrick. You really expect his play to at least equal, if not exceed, what it was last year. So good to have him back and saying all the right things in the media first day of OTAs.
And he talked about the solid depth Juan Thornhill will provide. And so Pittsburgh adding that depth to give themselves some options, knock on wood, that if Fitzpatrick, Elliott are unavailable, then Thornhill can step in, and Elliott praising Thornhill's experience and background.
All right. Who else defensively said anything? Patrick Queen?
What did Patrick Queen have to say? He talked about, I honestly missed some of the interview with Patrick Queen. He talked about being a fan of Aaron Rodgers as a kid growing up and kind of made a comment about that. Was there anything else? I might have missed some of the notable comments on Patrick Queen.
I don't really think there was anything earth-shattering. I think just being more comfortable. Said Cole Holcomb looks good working back from the knee injury. He talked a little bit about Scott McCurley, the new inside linebackers coach. I think that was really about all the notable things he really had to say, right?
Yeah, I think so. Anything, either quotes or any clips that we saw of note for defenders yesterday, I don't think we really learned as much. Like you said, Liao and Lee were working, and so that was good. But I don't think we have as much information about some of the box checking we do for the Steelers offense.
What did Beanie have to say? Did you read any of that?
I don't recall. No, did he? There was just the article on him. I don't think it was a video on Beanie.
Right. I don't think we got the enough to contextualize it outside of the few quotes, but I think in so many words he knows that he's at least getting the first crack at the slot position, but obviously not is going to have to continue to earn it moving forward.
Yeah, no surprise that he's opening as the starting nickel corner. You would expect him to. There's competition, but some of the other guys are going to have to earn their keep. New guys like Eccles, who plays inside out, and might have been a first-team outside corner yesterday because Slay wasn't there. I don't know if Trice was getting the nod. I don't have confirmation on that. Then Dante Kent, a rookie, some other future guys that may be in the mix. So Bishop, the leader in the clubhouse right now, but still a long ways to go for him to secure that job, which probably won't come until later in training camp preseason.
Absolutely.
Any other notes from OTAs day one, Dave?
Oh, nothing is jumping off at me here from all the stuff that we wrote about and all that's extreme notable to cover here.
One quick and small note, and I don't think we brought this up before. I kept making a note to mention it, but it ultimately becomes moot, and I'm not surprised by that in the least. The Carolina Panthers were attempting to schedule a joint practice with the Steelers ahead of their preseason game in the summer, and that's not going to happen. Dave Canales, the Panthers head coach, confirmed there will be no joint practice with Pittsburgh ahead of that final third preseason game, and there was no way that was going to work, Dave. To go from that, what is it, a Saturday to Thursday turnaround from that second to third preseason game, Pittsburgh on the road, trying to fit in a joint practice in there, trying to keep guys healthy on a short week, just logistically was never going to work. So not surprised that idea fell through.
All right, so we got some finality on that then.
We do. All right, Dave, let's talk about Terry Bradshaw's comments. He made a lot of waves on Tuesday evening, had an interview on a Chicago-based radio show with former Chicago Bears great Dan Hampton. The subject of Aaron Rodgers came up because it comes up in every football conversation, and consider Terry Bradshaw not a fan of Aaron Rodgers potentially and likely joining the Pittsburgh Steelers. He called the Steelers' pursuit of Rodgers a joke and made fun of Rodgers' unusual, eclectic views. He said, quote, Bradshaw of Rodgers, quote, that guy needs to stay in California, go somewhere and chew on bark, whisper to the gods out there. So tell us how you really feel, Terry Bradshaw, about Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, that obviously we were one of the first ones to jump on that as usual, and that thing blew up over the course of the last, I don't know how many, I guess about 18 hours ago now at this point here. He's Terry Bradshaw going all the way back to 2021 or 2020 or whenever the COVID and all, obviously wasn't a big fan of some of the things that Aaron Rodgers was weighing in on that. And Terry Bradshaw made his feelings kind of known about Rodgers back then. He's Terry Bradshaw's not a big I don't think he has any signed jerseys probably from Aaron Rodgers, and if indeed Aaron Rodgers becomes a Pittsburgh Steeler, I think there's zero chance of him maybe going to Terry Bradshaw and asking permission to wear number 12.
It's safe to say.
Nor would I think the Steelers would allow that to happen. But even if they did, and the Steelers said, "Well, if you could get Terry Bradshaw's permission to wear number 12, we'll let you have it." I think all that's pretty safe to assume that that's not going to happen. That number 12 will not be worn by Aaron Rodgers should he ultimately sign with the Steelers. And once again, I think this was an extension of Bradshaw just not being a fan of Aaron Rodgers. I think this is an extension of just the general thoughts overall about the kind of fit Aaron Rodgers is with his team. Long story short, Terry Bradshaw's not a fan of this at all, although it sounds like he's resigned to the fact that it's probably going to happen.
Well, do you think this is just a personal bias with an axe to grind because he doesn't seem to like Rodgers personally? Or do you think Bradshaw truly believes that Pittsburgh should not be pursuing Rodgers because it just doesn't make sense from a football standpoint?
I get the sense this is a lot more personal.
He did make the comment, Bradshaw did, and let me pull up the quote here so I have it spoken accurately. He says, quote, what are you going to do? Bring him in for 1 year? Are you kidding me? And so that seemed to touch on the football aspect. And we made this point before. Okay, you sign Rodgers for a season, you win 9-10 games, maybe you win a wild card game. You're not going to make a Super Bowl run truly. And then in 2026, you're sitting there going, who's our quarterback? And so I think Bradshaw is at least referencing the point of this is a bridge without a real direction.
Sure. And it's hard to argue that, right?
Sure. Everyone knows Rodgers signed. It's going to be a 1-year contract. Could he re-sign in 2026? It's possible, but it would seem unlikely. So I think Bradshaw's point is this bridge to nowhere.
And if you want to dissect everything that he said, that would sustain most. His whole argument, though, wasn't based around just that, though.
No, it was one part of it. And then he kind of got into the ribbing Rodgers for the darkness retreat and just some of this off-field stuff that Rodgers has become known for.
I mean, you agree this was more personal than anything.
It certainly had a very strong twinge of personal bias, but like I said, I think Bradshaw briefly and initially made a football point about this being a one-year thing. What are we doing?
Okay.
But
How do you think that resonates back to the organization, if any?
not much.
Because I mean,
mean,
this is absolutely blowing up in the last and will for the next several days. I mean, First Take and Get Up, and I mean this is that sound bite's going to be is already a big story now.
it is, but in a couple of days, the news cycle will move on to something else. Probably something else.
They won't move away from the whole Aaron Rodgers talk, though.
Yeah, probably not, but away from Bradshaw's comments and assuming that Rodgers doesn't sign within the next 24, 48 hours, by the time Rodgers does sign, these comments will be largely forgotten. And even if they are talked about in the media purview internally, it's not going to change Pittsburgh's calculation. They're still waiting for Rodgers. They'll still have open arms for him for whenever he decides.
Yeah, but at this point, with we still got OTAs going on for 5 more practices. How much more of a distraction could this potentially come when if the media if the me should the media would the media be doing their job to throw these comments back at whoever will gets in front of the microphone over the course of these next 5 practices?
Sure, I'm sure it's going to come up, and someone's going to be asked about that. Will Mike Tomlin be asked about that whenever he speaks? I think that'll be brought up. I mean, Bradshaw has been critical of Pittsburgh's quarterback moves in the past. He was critical of the team pivoting from Fields to Russell Wilson midway through last season. He's been critical of the team's handling and lack of development for Kenny Pickett. In that same interview, Bradshaw talked about that the Steelers didn't, or that Kenny Pickett did not fail the Steelers failed. Kenny Pickett did not give him the talent to succeed around him. I think there just are no winners in that situation. Pickett was not the guy. Pittsburgh did not develop and give Pickett tools to succeed. I think both can be true. So, Bradshaw certainly has been an outspoken critic of Pittsburgh's quarterback moves overall the last couple of years.
Okay. Without a doubt, the polarizing type of guy that Aaron Rodgers is or has been continues to, cause storylines.
The last thing I'll say about Bradshaw's comments is, and I make this point about the importance of being the quarterback, being the face, being the leader, putting your hand in the pile, the sweat equity, showing up and working. That's why I think it was so important for Rodgers to be at OTAs yesterday. Not to say that OTAs is going to be the difference between a good season or bad season for Rodgers and the team, but the principle of the matter of you are the quarterback. What other quarterback at OTAs around the other 31 teams, Dave, is not at practice?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I haven't gone through every team, but you see Josh Allen's about to have a baby or something, isn't he? And he's present. And I mean, I can't. I haven't gone team by team to know who's there, but I would probably imagine all of them are there.
Right. I think it's reasonable to assume that essentially every quarterback is there, especially now some of these quarterback deals have gotten done, like Brock Purdy, etc. So every other quarterback is there except for the presumed eventual Steelers starter in Aaron Rodgers. And you think back to Terry Bradshaw's day. Do you think they skipped practices back in his day? Were things optional? You put in the work, you were there for your guys. And so I bet your Bradshaw is looking at it from that standpoint too of, I know it is literally the old thought of back in my day, but I'm sure Bradshaw's thinking back in my day, no one would even dare to think about skipping out on, practices and extra time to work with your guys.
All right. Now, look, I think it was important, and we let off the show me kind of joking which way should we lead this thing off. I think it was important to at least address what what Terry Bradshaw had to say, and obviously we got our answer of whether or not Aaron Rodgers would be signed and in uniform for day one of OTAs. At this point, it does not look like Aaron Rodgers will be signed and in uniform for day two of OTAs, and within that, it's hard to imagine Aaron Rodgers being signed and in uniform by the end of the first week of OTAs. And when you fast forward to next week, the second week of OTAs, if you had to guess or had to predict, you'd probably predict that he's probably not going to be signed or in uniform for the second week of OTAs, correct?
Predicting anything Aaron Rodgers related is very difficult to do, but if he was not there for the first week, I don't see why he would be there for the second week, and so I will predict that he will not be there. And then the real, I guess, true line in the sand is for mandatory minicamp June 10th through June 12th.
All right. I wanted to move this in a direction, a little bit of different direction, and more of we always try to look at these things from every single angle that we possibly can here. Let me take you back to when was the meeting, specifically when Aaron Rodgers came to Pittsburgh to meet with the Steelers brass?
I can get you the exact date if you want it, but it was about a week after free agency began. I want to say March 21st, but we'll just say later in March, but I can get the date if you want it.
All right, and obviously that was after the official release of Aaron Rodgers from the Jets, right?
Correct, it was. Give me just 1 second. He visited March 21st.
All right, so we are over 2 months since that happened, right?
Yes, it'd be basically 9 weeks.
All right, let me tell you where I'm going with this. At that meeting, which was how long? 6 hours reportedly or whatnot, and getting to know each other. I don't know how much contract was definitely talked there. We have no idea, but I mean, there, a 6 hour meeting is obviously a long meeting, and get to know and all like that. Had Aaron Rodgers, if contract terms were indeed approached at that time, do you think some semblance of contract terms, is it logical to think that contract terms were potentially discussed at that point in time?
At the meeting itself?
When he came to Pittsburgh during that span of time?
No, I don't.
Or within the 48 hours preceding it. Let's put it that way.
I don't want to get into the weeds of maybe kind of getting into semantics. I don't think contract talks were discussed at or right before that meeting. I think they were discussed earlier, right around the start of free agency. And once that was kind of aligned and they were good on those terms, then it became about let's get him into Pittsburgh, make sure it's a good football fit. So I don't think money was discussed with Rodgers during that time, no.
Okay, what I'm getting at is within 48 hours of that meeting ended, from the time he was released from the Jets to the time to 48 hours after that meeting ended, do you think that Aaron Rodgers knew where the Steelers stood with him potentially financially?
Yes, I think contract stuff was basically settled before Rodgers even came into town.
All right. Had Aaron Rodgers liked and agreed to everything that he had heard 48 hours after that meeting in Pittsburgh took place, do you believe that he had the ability to sign a contract at that point?
I feel like I'm on the witness stand. I've been watching all these trials lately.
I'm just
messing with you. No, yes, I think he had the ability. Absolutely.
all right. So, in other words, if Aaron Rodgers wanted to be a Pittsburgh Steeler by now, he would have signed, right?
Yes.
In other words, had the ability, and the Steelers would have been all on board with that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Got my tinfoil hat on too tight this morning, but where I'm going with this is obviously I want to look at the other side of this and the other potential way this could potentially go, and that obviously means bringing up the Kirk Cousins situation. And there's obviously been a lot of rumblings about. Now, look, I'm not saying this is the way. I'm just trying to open up other potential viewpoints, options here. At any point, is it look, Kirk, to bring everybody up to speed here, Kirk Cousins was not at the first day of OTAs for the Falcons on Tuesday, right?
Correct. He skipped it.
All right. And in so many words, Raheem Morris says he's not in the building. Didn't see him. And this is after Kirk evidently being part of phase 1, phase 2, and being around and all like that. When you look at Kirk Cousins' situation, and if indeed the Falcons want to trade him and his contract and all like that, do you agree or disagree that it would make the most sense for the Falcons at this point with Kirk Cousins to have not traded Kirk Cousins until after June 1st, regardless, or I don't know what the correct word, regardless, irregardless of whatever offers that they may have had, unless they were just blown out of the water, it makes sense. It would make sense for the Falcons to stand pat with Kirk Cousins until after June 1st, right?
Sure. From what you laid out from the salary cap implication standpoint, yes, it makes more sense to wait until post June 1st to ship Kirk Cousins. And it is regardless, by the way, irregardless. Technically not a word.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Harvelchuk.
I got your back.
My high school, rest in peace, English teacher. And to further explain that real quick for everybody catching up, maybe Kirk Cousins, because of his way his contract, everybody knows that at this point that with him being on the roster back in March, that the $10 million roster bonus in 2026 became fully guaranteed at that time. The Falcons said, we don't care about that. We're going to hold on to him. He's a commodity and all like that. So moving past that, if the Falcons were to trade Kirk Cousins prior to June 1st, then all of the bonus proration on his contract rolls forward to the into dead money in 2025 of the tune of $37.5 million in dead money they would have to eat by trading Kirk Cousins prior to June 1st. By waiting until after June 1st, they only eat 12.5 in 12.5 million, I believe, in dead money for 2025, and then the remaining 25 million, I believe, goes into 2026's dead money. So it's a really substantial amount of dead money and impact on their cap this year, because according to the NFLPA, as of this morning, the Falcons only have nearly $5.35 million in available salary cap space. So, and if you look at, and I'm going way, what's your favorite term here? Way in front of my skis here. If you look at their roster and potential restructure candidates, it's not a great list. In other words, they're going to have to free up some salary cap space money between now and the start of the 2025 season, just because they're going to need some cap room here, brother. And if they don't have restructures or contract extensions on their mind, the only way they're going to get this is to move Kirk Cousins or get him to agree to do something with his contract, which I can almost guarantee is not going to happen. He's going to say, well, then cut me, after June 1st. And I don't think they really want to do that either. They want to get whatever they can for him at this. Long story short, even if the Steelers wanted, and this is out there, okay? But even if the Steelers, let's say, wanted to trade for Kirk Cousins, and that was potentially in their plans, there was virtually no way this such a deal was going to go down until after June the 1st. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I guess after they picked up that roster bonus, right, Atlanta did, then yeah, this would be the next time to potentially move him.
Right, because of the dead money aspect, because it makes the most fiscal sense at this point, from a cap perspective, especially for 2025, that even if they had talks about having a deal in place, it wasn't going to it wasn't or isn't going to become official until after June 1st.
Yeah, I know where you're going because now you tweeted this last night, but kind of sum up the tinfoil hat theory because I don't know if people are maybe quite getting it right now.
Is there any chance at all that the Steelers could, and look, I'm not saying, I'm just trying to look at this from every angle. Is there any chance at all maybe the Steelers are stringing Aaron Rodgers along to some degree, to make sure, that to potentially maybe work out a deal with the Falcons for uh Kirk Cousins?
So the theory is because most people think that Kirk Cousins is plan B. The theory you're presenting is that Aaron Rodgers is in fact plan B and Kirk Cousins is plan A.
I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
No, I know. I know you're not claiming that as fact or advocating that to be your belief, but even if we examine that theory, I just don't see the evidence for it. Why bring in Rodgers for a 6-hour visit? Why have a contract offer outstanding to him for apparently months now? Why have to trade assets for Kirk Cousins, potentially pay him more than you have to pay Aaron Rodgers? And I think Aaron Rodgers is the better quarterback right now than Kirk Cousins, too. I still view Kirk Cousins as the Steelers' backup plan and one I personally would not pursue, even if Rodgers does turn the Steelers down.
Okay. So in other words, once again, this rolls back to you're 100% convinced that any time that Aaron Rodgers moving forward is ready to sign that contract's there to be signed.
Yes, are you?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought all along, especially some of the comments that he made recently at the Mike Stud concert and all like that. I mean, it has felt for quite a while now. It has been Aaron Rodgers or bust. But I wanted to just open up. I wanted to look at it from another perspective that really we haven't looked at it from, and that was the June 1st date in regards to Kirk Cousins, because there's no way, shape, or form the Steelers were going to trade for Kirk Cousins before June 1st, and June 1st is not here yet.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I understand, but I still view him as Pittsburgh. I still think Pittsburgh views him as the backup plan.
All right. So in no way, shape, or form do you believe that maybe any of this has become, well, let's wait to put the in other words, let's hold off signing this until we at least get past June 1st.
Yeah, I don't. I think if Rodgers wanted to sign today, Pittsburgh would say, "Here you go. Here's the contract. Let's bring you into camp. Let's get your jersey number, and let's get ready to go." The only thought I could offer, even similar to that, is how long does Pittsburgh wait? And is there a point where Pittsburgh says we can't wait longer for Rodgers? We're going to now seriously pursue other options. Cousins still being the backup plan in that scenario, but then Pittsburgh starts actively pursuing somebody else. That I don't think will take place anytime soon. I think that would have to be a close to training camp situation for that conversation to start up in Pittsburgh. But that's the only thing I can offer that could become close to that theory.
All right, and the only reason all this crossed my mind is just focusing more on the Kirk Cousins not showing up at how many different landing spots are there for Kirk Cousins at this point, right?
Not many.
I mean, really, how many you know how many teams at this point in time could seriously be considering, or at least thinking about maybe trading for Kirk Cousins?
Right now, it's just Pittsburgh. We'll see what happens in places like Minnesota as they get to evaluate J.J. McCarthy through the spring, because that was the thing where they backed McCarthy. They said they're out on Rodgers, but they basically wanted to get a view of McCarthy through OTAs and spring ball. And if they don't like what they see, or if health-wise is limiting McCarthy in any form or fashion, then maybe they become a player for Rodgers again or Kirk Cousins. Maybe the Saints will take a look after OTAs, but I think right now it's just Pittsburgh.
And the Falcons don't want to help out the Saints, right? If they can help it, unless it's the best offer they can get, unless they really got them over a barrel as far as compensation, right?
That's true. That's true.
I mean, is there any other teams that we're missing here other than ones that could potentially sustain an injury moving forward?
Yeah, barring something unforeseen, I think those are the teams.
All right. That's where all this stemmed from, was the June 1st date, because it would not make any sense whatsoever if you look at it from all angles when it comes to the Falcons to have dealt to deal Kirk Cousins until after June 1st.
No, I understand, and we'll see what happens. Cousins clearly showing he's unhappy. The Falcons have been pretty adamant they plan to keep Kirk Cousins, and they're not itching to trade him. If they get a good offer, they're willing to move him, but they certainly are in no hurry to do anything in replacing and trading Kirk Cousins.
All right. So the only way, in your opinion, the only way the Steelers would go after and acquire Kirk Cousins if Aaron Rodgers said, no, I'm not coming, or no, I don't want to sign with you, or I'm retiring, right?
Well, like I said, if it got into late July and Rodgers has not given you an answer, do you start picking up the phone and start pursuing other avenues? I think you might have to do that if you're the Steelers, but those conversations won't become relevant or ripe until I think late July.
All right. How Matthew Marksy this morning posed the question, what was it here in what he wrote this morning? At what point is Steelers signing Aaron Rodgers a net negative?
I think if he does not sign by the time mandatory minicamp ends, it's really, really hard to look at your locker room and try to sell them on it, even under the assumption and guise and motivation that Rodgers is the best quarterback. I think when it comes to quarterback, obviously talent matters a ton, but it's not the only thing. There's a leadership aspect, there's a belief aspect, a respect aspect. Players may not have, if players don't respect your left guard or your star receiver who's an alpha, you can get by with that. But if they don't respect your quarterback, it's really hard to have success. And when things get tough late in the season, and things get tough for every team, and they'll get tough for Pittsburgh at some point during the year. Can you rally? Can you lead? Can you put trust in a guy? If you skip the entire spring session, I think it's really, really hard to sell him on the team.
And you put all your thoughts into words yesterday in a post about Aaron Rodgers, and long story short, Aaron Rodgers has been one that's never afraid to criticize or point out errors in guys. And, if he's not there through OTAs and, God forbid, mini camp, and he gets into a situation, gets on a young guy like Roman Wilson for not being in the right place at the right time, or running the wrong route, in Roman Wilson's head, he's going to be saying, damn, man, if you would have been there during rookie minicamp, during OTAs and mandatory minicamp, maybe we could have had some of this crap sorted out. And he wouldn't be wrong either.
I don't think he'd be wrong at all. Absolutely. And you could sit there and say that Rodgers is 41, 20-year veteran. He doesn't need OTAs. Fair. A lot of veterans don't. But he's brand new to the team. And even past that, the players need to work with Rodgers. The young guys need to work with Aaron Rodgers, because he does bring a high bar, because he does expect perfection. And those are all good things. And those are reasons why he's great, a 4-time MVP and a future first ballot Hall of Famer. But guys need to work with him. It's a young offense. And so Rodgers may not need the reps, but the guys around him need the reps with Rodgers. And that's the point.
Assuming he misses mandatory minicamp and then comes into training camp and walks in, hello, I'm your starting quarterback. Let's go. I've got all the answers here. How polarizing do you think that will be? And how much animosity, or do you think players go that far, especially the older ones on the roster, saying, man, glad you could finally make time to finally get in here and us get to work? How will Aaron Rodgers is not going to change as a person, right? And as a teammate.
Sure. And I don't think he's necessarily a terrible teammate. I don't want to go that far. To answer your question, will there be animosity? I think players can compartmentalize and can try to put things aside and focus on a common goal. I think especially with selfless players that Pittsburgh now largely has in their locker room. Pittsburgh has tried to improve the culture and get rid of, some malcontents at Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, etc. But like I said, when things get tough and tight, and you got to have that kind of cash with your teammates. If you're the quarterback and you're going to rally the guys and keep guys buying in and not let frustrations boil over, if you've not been able to really build that up throughout the year, throughout the offseason program, where guys like you, respect you, they want to work hard for you, they want to play hard for you, they're all in this together, that's when I think those cracks really get exposed, where things get tough and tight, and that's where you can really have a locker room fall apart if your quarterback's not been a good leader to keep the group together.
All right. all my tinfoil hat's back off now. And look, you see where I'm trying to go with this, just trying to look at all angles.
Sure, we got nothing but time to talk about
All
Aaron
right.
Rodgers potentially signing, so it's worth exploring every angle.
All right. Now it's been how many days has it been exactly since Aaron Rodgers came to Pittsburgh again? Recap me. It's been over 2 months. It was like the 21st of March, right?
It's been 9 weeks, feels like 9 years.
All right. And assuming all the conversations have been had that we think that have been had about money and role and offensive philosophy and yada yada over the course at this point. Alex, why hasn't Aaron Rodgers signed yet?
Because he has leverage. He doesn't have an incentive for him personally to sign. Pittsburgh will wait, clearly, and he can sit there and do his own thing and enjoy his offseason. And I think it may just come down to, I don't want to work in the offseason. Rodgers has talked about in past CBA negotiations, because he was a player rep or at least an outspoken against some of the CBAs, there shouldn't be off-season programs. They should start basically in August, and that's when guys should go back to work. So he's a veteran. A lot of veterans do not like OTAs, do not like the mandatory minicamps. They'd rather just train on their own and be able to hang out and have a whole summer and spring off. And so I think this may just truly come down to, I just don't want to be there for OTAs for the offseason stuff. He wasn't there with the Jets last year. He was out there in Egypt. And I have the leverage to skip that stuff. And so I will exercise that leverage I have.
How healthy is this overall? And how surprising is this overall?
That it's gotten to this point,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty surprising, at least in the sense that if you had asked me back in March, would we still be undecided and not have clarity on Rodgers' future on May 28th, I'd sit there and say they'd have an answer by now.
Doesn't it all, I mean, it's not a good aroma right now at this point. You can understand why there's all this every other day about this isn't healthy for the Steelers. Why are the Steelers letting this happen? They're being held hostage. Shame on them, especially for a guy like, I mean, it just, all of it stinks at this point.
Right. And guess who has to address it all?
Yeah.
Everybody but Aaron Rodgers. Every player has to deal with these questions now, and Rodgers gets to sit at home or wherever he's at and gets to ignore all this stuff. That's why he should be there, because he's putting these players in this spot.
Is there any chance at all this is all related to contract offer?
I've seen no evidence of that. Could it? I suppose, but I have no evidence to support that.
All right, within that, we've talked. Aaron Rodgers says, "I'd play for $10 million," right?
He always says 10 M's. I always wonder if he's doing a little cheeky. I was meaning something else, but yeah, point taken.
How convinced are you that if Aaron Rodgers signs, it will be for $10 million cash in 2025?
I expect it to be more than 10 M's.
Do you expect it to be more than 15 M's?
We've had this discussion a couple of times. I'll say it's in that 20 to 25 million range.
Okay. So, but he said he's willing to play for 10 M's. How many times will that be thrown back at him?
I mean, at this point, he needs to sign so it can be thrown at him. So I'll let him deal with the question, because that means he's at least signed and there's finality to this ongoing saga. But I mean, if it comes up, he'll just give an answer. It'll be a story for 8 minutes, and that's that.
What if on June 2nd, Kirk Cousins is the Pittsburgh Steelers' new quarterback?
I don't know, Dave. I mean, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, but at least there'll be an answer. At least I don't want Kirk Cousins. I want Kirk Cousins less than I want Aaron Rodgers.
Sure,
but,
I get that. You've made that clear.
Yeah, but at least there'd be an answer, and Pittsburgh can move forward. They still feel stuck in terms of this holding pattern of we're waiting. It's hard to really be fully in. There's still uncertainty. Pittsburgh's the only team that does not really have a 100% clear map of their quarterback depth chart right now in the NFL, and those are all problematic to have in May.
I mean, even if the guy doesn't want to attend mandatory, OTAs and all, and how can't you just sign the contract? And
well, if you sign and then you skip, that's also a story too.
Yeah, but I mean, is it?
Yeah, if he skips, if he signs and then just doesn't show up, sure. I mean, I listened to Albert Breer on his podcast yesterday, and he made the point that he thinks there's kind of a tacit agreement between Pittsburgh and Rodgers, but they said, well, Aaron, we know we don't want you to be at OTAs, and so just don't sign the contract until after, and that way, but there won't be questions about it. But I'm sitting there going, dude, there are a million questions about Aaron Rodgers right now. He is the number one story, even though he's not under contract. So that made no sense to me. Yeah, it'd be a big story if Rodgers signed and then was not at OTAs, especially with what happened with the Jets last year.
Okay. All right.
Because again, he's the only quarterback not at OTA. What other quarterback is not at voluntary
Sure.
OTAs right now?
Sure.
Let me ask you this. I posed this question, or I had this comment yesterday. What is your expected win range in terms of what would not surprise you with Mason Rudolph as the 17-game starter versus Aaron Rodgers as the 17-game starter? What would the win range look like for both quarterbacks?
Obviously we got a long way to go here before we have to put our official predictions down and all like that. I think Aaron Rodgers is worth a couple of wins more than Mason Rudolph.
My response was Rudolph 7 to 9 wins, Rodgers 8 to 10 wins. Do you disagree on either of those points?
Well, in other words, you're saying Aaron Rodgers is worth one more win.
Basically, yeah. I mean, the range 7 to 9 versus 8 to 10. Yeah.
All right. I think Aaron Rodgers is worth 2 more wins.
Okay, so what would your range of wins be for each guy if you had to put it into a number? Is 7 to 9 fair for Rudolph? Would you say 6 to 8? Would you have a smaller range, bigger range? What are you thinking?
Regardless of who this quarterback is this year, I'm finding it hard to see this team win more than 10 games right now.
Okay, so that's a ceiling, you think. What is the floor?
7 wins, 8,
Okay.
6, 7 wins maybe.
So with Rudolph, you put the range at 7 to 10?
Potentially, yeah.
And then with Rodgers, it would be a 2 higher. So would you say 9 to 12?
Like I said, regardless of who the quarterback is, I just can't see this team winning more than 10 games right now.
So would your
from where
win
they
range
sit.
be identical with regardless of the quarterback? If it was Rudolph and Rodgers, would you say it'd be 7 to 10 for both guys?
If this team goes into the if this team goes into the regular season the way it sits right now with Mason Rudolph, I would be a little bit surprised if they got to 9 wins.
Okay, so what I'm just trying to get, I'm not trying to like pin you down on this because it's just a broad range, but what do you think the win range is? It's 7
Well,
to
I
8?
mean, I think you can leave it. I think Aaron Rodgers is worth 2 more wins.
Right, but I'm just asking, does that get you from 10 to 12? Because I'm just trying to see, because, there's a difference between winning 8 games versus winning 12 games.
Well, I mean, if Mason Rudolph can win 10 games with the unit, then I think Aaron Rodgers can win 12.
Okay, so your range for Rudolph is or your range for Rodgers, excuse me, is 10 to 12?
I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers is worth 2 more wins, whatever they get to. I think the bulk of the conversation should be is how many wins is Aaron Rodgers worth?
Right, I'm just asking what that looks like in totality.
Looks like Aaron Rodgers is worth two more wins than Mason Rudolph.
And you think okay, so how many wins do you think Rudolph can get this team?
I mean, from where I sit right now, probably about 8 wins.
Okay, so with Rodgers, 10 wins.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I just was curious if you had a different take. Just in terms of ceilings and floors, in terms of what wouldn't surprise you. Like with me, Rudolph 7 to 9. If Rudolph started all year and they won 7 games, wouldn't surprise me. If they won 9 games, wouldn't surprise me. Rodgers 8 to 10, same thing. That's kind of my feeling on trying to quantify. Because I just say that because I know Ben on a podcast I think last week talked about 7 or something wins with Rudolph and 11 wins with Rodgers. A pretty big gap there. I didn't know if you had a similar thought on kind of a big gap between Rudolph versus Rodgers in terms of expected win outcomes.
Well, look, I mean, we're sitting here in late May. I mean, are they going to go out and get another wide receiver? Is the offensive line going to look better? There's just so many variables. Is the defense going to stay healthy? So many things obviously can change this, but I think it boils down to me that I view Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback that can that is worth 2 more wins than Mason Rudolph.
Okay, I don't want to hammer it, but what do you think the ceiling is in terms of just overall win total with Rodgers? I know it's 2 more than Rudolph, but
well, I just put it at I'd be surprised if this team wins 10. I think the ceiling is 10 wins if Aaron Rodgers shows up.
Gotcha. So 10 and 7, which is very much on brand for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's going to take a lot to happen, regardless of who the quarterback is, between now and week 1 of the season for me to predict the Steelers going 11-6 on the season or better.
Same. I'm with you. It would probably take a lot to say less than. What would it take a lot on the other end in terms of their low end?
Well, in other words, with you don't think that there's that much of a difference, obviously, between. Then why would you put yourself through all the bullshit with Aaron Rodgers for one more win?
Well, one win can mean a lot. It's a 17-game season. It's not like baseball where one win over a 162-game season doesn't mean a whole lot. One win can be the difference between playoffs and not. And Pittsburgh's always on that borderline wild card 6th, 7th seed. And so I think one win can mean a lot. I think, if you had kind of a WAR system that baseball has for football, the WARs wouldn't be 7 or 8 for most guys. It'd be pretty in that 1 to 2 range. And so I think, I think Rodgers is a better quarterback, but not significantly so. It's not like Rodgers is the prime quarterback he once was. And so, I think it gets you probably an additional win if you're an Aaron Rodgers-led team. But a one win can mean a lot in terms of the course and outlook of your season.
How much, what percentage of you just wishes at this point the Steelers would roll with Mason, Will Howard, and Skyler, just to see what it goes, and then if Mason does fine, it's absolutely great, and at worst, at least you get a look at Will Howard for X amount of games. How much of you wishes that at this point, knowing what this team has gone through, with the waiting game with Aaron Rodgers, how much of you just wishes that, damn, just roll with Rudolph and Will Howard and Skyler and, just see what happens?
Pretty close to that point, because my line in the sand, I said this for a while now, pre-draft, was the start of OTAs, where this is the commitment period. This is are you in? Are you out? You with us or not? And clearly the answer is, as of right now, I'm not with you guys. Not enough to sign and be there and put in the work. So I think I'll fully be there if he is not there for mandatory minicamp starting June 10th.
All right,
but I'm pretty close.
Regardless of when he signs, even if he walks into day 1 of training camp and signs the contract, Aaron Rodgers, he's worth chasing that one extra win over.
Well, I think the longer this thing goes, the more diminishing returns there could be, because then you start talking about
the win, right?
the locker. Well, as of right now, that's where I'm at. But like I said, there could be diminishing returns because you're missing work and the locker room fracture. I tweeted that yesterday based on where I think things currently stand. But the longer this thing goes on, I mean, because you can't say that, go sign him September 1st because he's worth the extra win, because I don't know if he's worth the extra win at that point.
Okay.
Like, I don't know if he'll get an extra win from Rodgers if he's only there in September and he's missed all this time and his teammates are now pissed and Rudolph gets pushed out. And there's a lot of, things you can't quantify that could hurt the team by Rodgers showing up so late.
Okay.
But I just wanted to get your thought on that range there. So that's all I got, Dave. If you have anything else, let me know. Jerry Dulac says there is no deadline for Aaron Rodgers except the start of the season. And so, Adam Schefter made this reference yesterday, too, that he said the only deadline is basically September 7th, which is the start of the season, week 1, Steelers at the Jets. And Dulac basically mirroring that language to say that even in training camp, Rodgers could still show up and Pittsburgh will welcome him with open arms.
Boy, I can only imagine what those going through the players' head during the 5.5 to 6 weeks between mandatory minicamp and the start of training camp, and Aaron Rodgers is still not under contract.
I know, and that's the other thing, too. Like, if Rodgers misses the entire spring, these young guys, they don't have there's no launch point to work with Rodgers from the spring. Like, if you work with Rodgers in the spring and you sit there and say, okay, this is what it's like working with Aaron Rodgers, I can now spend the next at least 5-6 weeks before training camp mentally, physically preparing myself for that. This is what he likes. This is what he says he wants me to work on. I'm going to really focus in on that. So by training camp, I'm good to go. We're on the same page. Any issues are corrected and we can really move forward. If you're starting that, fresh start, clean slate at training camp, then you have to work through those growing pains. And that's all time wasted. And training camp is supposed to be about truly getting ready for the season. The time right now is kind of getting to know each other, getting, your feet on solid ground, building a good foundation, and then really hitting the ground running come Latrobe. And if Rodgers is only showing up at Latrobe, it throws the whole process off.
All right. And once again, my comments on Kirk Cousins was just to look at this from, making that a point of topic to talk about today is just merely centers around the June 1st aspect and how it wouldn't even make sense for the Falcons to trade him before June 2nd per se.
All right, sounds good, Dave. Let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right. Putter from San Antonio, Texas. Keep up the great work. Love you guys. On Monday's podcast, you reviewed the players that were lost for the season. Logan Lee, Roman Wilson, Holcomb, etc. No mention of Leal. Then you reviewed the position groups in an attempt to understand the depth chart. You reviewed defensive line, outside linebackers. Again, no mention of Leal. Does he stand any chance of succeeding in the NFL? He's still young. Or was this an example of good college player in a poor scheme fit? We probably should have talked more about Leal in that list of players that, and even Logan Lee for that matter, of players that dealt with injury last year. But as a whole, I guess what he's getting to here, does Leal stand a chance of succeeding in the NFL at this point, or is this an example of a good college player in a poor scheme fit?
Yeah, I apologize. He slipped my mind. That injury happened so early last year in that Cowboys game. There's a chance. I mean, he did look better last year. Had a good training camp, made the roster, but with all the additions they've made, him being a tweener, it's hard to see. It's hard to see him make it this year.
You definitely don't have him written in pen right now. Was he in your first 53-man roster prediction? I can't remember.
No, he was not.
Okay. It's a big summer for him, man. Big summer for him.
I'm not even sure what it looks like for him to make the team. Who's he beating out? It's possible, but it's a tough path.
It really, really is. Paul Brown writes in, David Knox, given that OTAs have started and Aaron Rodgers remains unsigned, I wanted to check in on everyone's thoughts about him. Alex, I recall you drew the line at the start of OTAs, and Dave, I'm not sure where you stood. Personally, I think we've waited too long. The Steelers need to make a firm quarterback decision as the situation has become a distraction. I believe we should commit to Mason this season and look forward to the future. He says, let's be honest, are we really just one Aaron Rodgers away from a Super Bowl? We're likely looking at a 9-8 or 10-7 season with an early playoff exit. Either way, why not give Mason a full off season as the designated starter and see what he can do? If it doesn't work out, we can target a quarterback in next year's draft. The current approach of pursuing aging veterans feels like we're avoiding addressing the real issue or failure to plan for life after Roethlisberger. Instead of applying another short-term fix, we should acknowledge this mistake and focus on long-term solution. What do you think about what Paul had to say?
Yeah, I get the frustration. And like I said, I'm getting close to the point where I'm just saying, all right, we tried to pursue Rodgers. It's not going to happen. It's been the best interest of the team to move on. Like I said, my deadline was OTAs. I can maybe stretch it to mandatory minicamp. That is maybe what I think really should be the last thing, where this thing just gets silly and laughable and Pittsburgh being strung along. Dave, I know you said before the draft your line was the draft. I don't know if that's changed over the course of time, but what are your thoughts?
Hey, I never thought it would have been this long that we're talking about. And, as I stated in our most recent, I think the other day there, man, it feels like mandatory minicamp. You really want him in there by that point.
Are you out on Rodgers if he's not there for mandatory minicamp?
I mean, if he's not signed that, I mean, it's hard for this team, in my opinion. It's unfair for this team to have to go the 5.5 weeks not knowing is he or isn't he going to sign the rest of the damn summer. So I think if indeed, if we are to assume that the offer's there on the table, that and there's no negotiation to be had other than him deciding to sign the contract by the time mandatory minicamp starts and he does not sign, I would be tired of playing the game, to be quite honest with you. I just don't think it's fair all the way around. And life's not fair. I get that. And you've got yourself in a position where you're almost at his mercy, right? At this point, and you got guys in there working hard. You got Mason Rudolph in there working hard, and he's obviously won ball games for you in the past. You know who he is to some degree. Man, if this guy has all the information that he needs and needed extra time for personal stuff, and if you get to the start of mandatory minicamp and he still can't sign on the dotted line for whatever reason, go eat bark.
Hey, there you go. Terry Bradshaw, words invoked. The one thing Mike Tomlin has done exceptionally well throughout his entire Steelers tenure, and this I don't think can be debated, is he has never lost a locker room. And that is a really hard thing to do through all the ups and downs of seasons of trials, tribulations. He has never lost a locker room. I think if you keep stringing this Rodgers thing along past mandatory minicamp, you will run the risk of losing the locker room. Not immediately necessarily, but you will look like the fool, and will your voice start to go stale? And when things, like I said earlier, when things get tough, will people buy into your message? And what happened last year with the quarterback situation, I'm sure internally teammates were not super happy with seeing Fields get replaced like that. If this happens again with Rodgers, and even a more egregious situation of Rodgers is getting to show up whenever he wants to and Rudolph getting pushed out, I really think he will run the risk of the locker room starting to turn on Mike Tomlin on the franchise.
Well, look, Aaron Rodgers is not going to change things he likes to do and wants to do, and cadences and checks and things of that. Everything associated. I mean, he's going to come in wanting to do certain things that he likes to do, right? And if you don't work on those things in mandatory minicamp, and he shows up day one in training camp, and the rest of the team is used to doing, they don't even know what
Right.
the things that he likes to do and wants to do. And then you show up day one of training camp, and all right, boys, here's what I want to do. And you start trying to get used to that. How fair is it to those other players to have to learn that on the fly, along with Aaron Rodgers having to learn the offense, so to speak, on the fly, and learn what certain players like to do and what's expected? I mean, you're spending your entire training camp of trying to get on the same page with things that just Aaron Rodgers likes to do as a quarterback, let alone each and individual play call.
100%, exactly. And you're behind by definition as a team. As every other franchise is barreling ahead towards training camp, they put in the work, they're full speed ahead. You're just at the starting point. I mean, it's like running a marathon, and your opponent gets a 5 mile head start. You can be the fastest runner in the world. You're not going to catch up. It's just not going to happen. So, and on top of that, oh yeah, Rodgers gets pissed at you every time that you run the wrong route because we hadn't worked together, and so yeah, there's mistakes, but throw that on top of all that you outlined.
All right, and then let's say Aaron Rodgers signs the day after mandatory minicamp ends, and he's like, "All right, boys, everybody jump on a plane for these next 5 weeks here, and come out to California, and let's put in a lot of hard work out there and get to know each other." Is that really fair on the players?
No, it's not. And it would just kind of be making a mockery of the offseason program those guys all work through if Rodgers signed right after the OTAs minicamp sessions wrapped up. I think about Mike Tomlin. He talks about football justice, and you get what you put in and all that kind of stuff. And how can you, as Tomlin, talk about that and allow Rodgers to really dictate on his terms when he shows up and when he works? And Rudolph was here working, and now Rodgers bumps him out of the way. Rodgers is a better quarterback. I understand that. We could argue better chance to win, but it's hard to, like I said, that's where you start losing the locker room, because you can't have a coach talk about football justice and you get out what you put in and the work ethic. And we need guys who are working, put their hand in the pile when your quarterback is not doing that.
Let me tell you, if I'm somebody like, I don't know who's veteran tenured on that offense, Seumalo, yeah, even though I'm gonna be pretty hot if he if he shows up at day one and signs his contract at training camp, you know,
Yeah.
Fryermuth, it's just it's a hard sell at that point, man. We got to now, not only is it tough to come in here and start training camp and all like that, now we've got to learn everything that he likes and wants to do, because that's the way he's always or has done it for all this time. Just that's why I think that's why I think mandatory minicamp needs to be that hard line in the sand. But to hear Jerry Dulac talk, it's not going to be.
And I'm losing, I don't want to say faith, but I'm losing the belief that Rodgers will even show up for mandatory minicamp, because he's not showing up for OTAs. And yes, I know it's technically mandatory, but he's not under contract. And if it's just, I don't want to do off-season stuff, that's going to apply to the minicamp in mid-June. So I'm starting to believe that he is not going to sign until after that happens.
That's why it rolls back to kind of what I said a little bit earlier. All this just stinks.
Yeah, this is how you're starting the year. It's supposed to be the fun part of the year where it's hope springs eternal and everyone's in the best shape of their life and we're all kumbaya and everything looks great. And Pittsburgh has this cloud over them before anything's even negatively happened on the field.
And then, according to us, you're going through all this for one, maybe two more wins.
Yeah, and I understand, and that's why Pittsburgh is still in this pursuit. And I understand like I said earlier, one or two more wins, it can be huge in the scope and span of a 17-game season. But the longer this thing goes on, the more I think you're going to have diminishing returns and the intangible impact negatively of Rodgers signing so late and how players are going to react to that and feel about that is going to eat into the talent that Rodgers has and the wins he could provide you from a pure ability standpoint. If that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Michael asked about void years. In Monday's podcast, you spoke about cash versus cap spending for a good portion of the show. I certainly understand the difference a lot better now, thanks to you. He says, can you please explain how a voided contract can have an impact on the salary cap? Your examples are always helpful. As always, I thank you for your hard work. And Alex, I am addicted to this blog and all the podcasts. Thank you, Michael. Look, long story short, if let's say you brought a guy in, you want to assign him to a 1 year, he demanded, $20 million or $25 million, but didn't want to lock himself up for 5 years or even more than 1 year. And the team was crunched from a cap perspective. They add on 4 dummy years in addition to this year. They give them a large part. I mean, let's say it's 22 million. You give them $20 million as a signing bonus. You divide that, or 25. No, it'd be 27 and then $25 million signing bonus. You give them a $25 million signing bonus, and then you break that up over 5 years for amortization purposes. That's $5 million. So what you're doing is you're stretching out the cap hit, $5 million in the current year and then $5 million in each of the 4 years after that, knowing good and well that the contract's going to void after the 2025 year. That's kind of how I don't want to say circumventing it, but at least you're putting off the initial cap, because even if you were to do that, the remaining of the 25 million, because 5 million is going up against this year against the cap, and then the other 20 million would be divided up over the remaining 4 years there. As soon as that guy hits free agency, all that other 20 million is going to escalate into 2026, right? But it's just a way of lowering the initial cap hit as low as possible for the current year. So that's how the void years come in and all like that. I hope that's a workable enough explanation on that. It will be interesting to see how the discussion about the voided contract years kind of coincides with what Roger Goodell said about the integrity of the cap and all like that.
Yeah, we'll have to see what those proposed changes are. I know Jason Fitzgerald, OTC, mentioned maybe they get rid of the post-June 1st deadline. That's also kind of holding players hostage. I don't think the players' union is going to likes that rule too much, and so we'll see what happens.
All right, I think we're about an hour and a half in right here, so pretty good conversation. I think I think we hit on everything that need to be hit on, right?
Yeah, got to get out of here. We have players coming in pretty soon, and so we'll talk about what happens at OTAs rest of the week. Come back Friday and recap things.
All right. I doubt we're talking about Aaron Rodgers signing, right?
We'll talk about Aaron Rodgers. Probably won't talk about Aaron Rodgers signing. Agreed.
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. Keep those emails coming in. Let us know what you think about us talking about Rodgers and Cousins and all today. If you got any questions concerning that. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.